Picture this. You step through the towering vermilion gates of the Forbidden City. The air shifts immediately, quieter, hushed, heavy with a faint sweetness of burning incense. Stone courtyards stretch endlessly, their lattice windows glowing with candlelight. Silk rustles in the distance, the soft shuffle of slippers across polished tiles. You are now in the inner court, the private world no commoner was ever meant to see. At first glance, it is a paradise. Gardens bloom with pavilions painted in gold and jade. Perfumed chambers glimmer with embroidered draperies and lacquered screens. Jewels sparkle from coiffed hair as women adorned in satin and pearls bow their heads in graceful silence. To outsiders, this place was the very essence of luxury, a sanctuary crafted for pleasure, where hundreds, even thousands, of women lived to serve the Son of Heaven. But listen more closely. Beneath the perfume lingers another scent, unease. Look past the shimmering silks, and you see anxious eyes behind painted faces. The walls, beautiful as they are, stretch like cages across endless corridors. These women have everything, and yet they have nothing at all. They cannot leave. They cannot choose. Their lives are ruled by the dragon throne, their fates shifting with a single whim or rumor. This is the truth of the Imperial Harem. It was never just a palace of silks and smiles. It was a battlefield, quiet, hidden, but merciless. For within these red-walled precincts, alliances were forged like weapons. Scandals ignited rebellions. Jealousies poisoned cups of tea. And behind every whisper of silk, the fate of an emperor, and sometimes the fate of an entire dynasty, trembled in secrecy. The harem was as deadly as it was dazzling. One concubine's rise could change succession. One empress's downfall could throw the empire into chaos. Eunuchs became spies, lovers became rivals, and the emperor himself was often more pawn than master in the games woven behind these vermilion walls. So when we speak of the Forbidden City's harem as a world of paradise, remember, paradise was propaganda. The truth, the untold truth, was survival, betrayal, and power struggles written in silk and blood. Join me as we step deeper into this hidden world, because the mysteries of the Chinese imperial harem are not just stories of love and beauty. They are stories of survival, scandal, and the secrets of the dragon itself. Before we journey further into the shadows of the dragon's harem, let's pause for just a moment. If you enjoy uncovering the untold stories and darker corners of history that textbooks often leave behind, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive. For centuries, poets, artists, and foreign visitors fed the image of the imperial harem as a paradise of delights. They imagined endless gardens filled with embroidered silks shimmering in the sun. They pictured women reclining on jade couches, pampered with jewels, perfumed oils, and music drifting through lacquer halls. To the outside world, the harem was a dream of every empire. Leisure without labor, beauty without end, a golden promise hidden within the Forbidden City. But that was the myth. The reality was far darker. The harem was not an open garden, but a locked world. Once a woman crossed its vermilion gates, she could never leave. It became her entire universe, a confined space measured by walls rather than horizons. Inside, a rigid hierarchy governed every movement. At the top stood the empress, the mother of a nation, surrounded by favorite consorts and concubines. Below them cascaded ranks of lesser women, each scrambling for slivers of attention that might elevate their status. Every gesture, a glance from the emperor, a whispered word, a gift of silk, could mean the difference between obscurity and unimaginable power. But that power came at a price. These women weren't simply companions. They were pawns in dynastic politics. Bearing a son could secure a lifetime of privilege or spark deadly rivalries. Failing to produce an heir could mean neglect, dismissal, or worse. Survival meant scheming, vigilance, and forming alliances in a court where treachery wore the face of friendship. And the stakes of this hidden world went far beyond silk-lined chambers. The harem wasn't just personal. It was political. Jealousies between consorts influenced imperial decisions. Plots within the harem shifted the line of succession. Entire wars were sparked by rivalries that began in whispered conversations behind painted screens. So while the poem spoke of paradise, the truth was closer to prison, one where survival depended less on beauty than on cunning. The harem was not simply a place for pleasure. It was a crucible of ambition, danger, and dynastic struggle that shaped the fate of an empire. Life inside the harem was meticulously choreographed. Every morning, the palace bell rang before dawn, signaling the start of another day behind the vermilion walls. Servants swept the long corridors. Eunuchs shuffled silently past silk-covered screens, carrying trays of jade bowls filled with delicately prepared meals. Concubines awoke not to freedom, but to routine. For the higher-ranked consorts, attendants helped them dress in layers of embroidered satin, hairpins of jade and gold carefully placed to catch the morning light. For those lower down the hierarchy, the countless women who might never lay eyes on the emperor, the day began with quieter rituals, stitching embroidery, practicing music, or waiting endlessly, hoping to be summoned. But every movement, no matter how private, was watched. The eunuchs, castrated men sworn to serve, not only delivered orders, they enforced silence. They recorded which women were summoned to the emperor's bedchamber. They monitored conversations, whispered alliances, and even intercepted letters disguised as poems or prayers. Within the harem, nothing escaped their notice. Meals were eaten in assigned halls. Walks in the gardens were timed and limited. Even festivals, with their drums and lanterns, unfolded beneath a blanket of protocol. To outsiders, it looked like luxury. Meals of rare delicacies, silks from across the empire, jewels from distant provinces. But true freedom was absent. Once a woman entered these walls, she could not leave except in disgrace, death, or on the rare occasion of being sent to a convent. The isolation was profound. Some lived their entire lives never seeing the bustling markets of Beijing again, never stepping foot outside the red walls of the Forbidden City. They wrote poems of longing for the world beyond, poems that almost always remained hidden, censored, or destroyed. And always, a quiet tension lingered, because in the harem, beauty was currency, but fate turned on the emperor's shifting desire, or on the schemes of rivals. One woman's gift of jewelry might mean another's fall. A single successful pregnancy could elevate a concubine overnight. A miscarriage could doom her forever. They weren't just wives. They were prisoners. They weren't just companions. They were pawns of empire. Behind layers of silk and gold, their every gesture fed into machinery of dynastic power. They smiled when told to smile. They bowed when told to bow. And at night, in candlelit silence, many wondered if they were ornaments to be admired, or sacrifices waiting to be made. The walls of the harem were not only lined with silk, they echoed with whispers of ambition. And for some women, those whispers carried them from obscurity to domination. Their stories remind us why the harem was never just a sanctuary, but a storm. Her rise began quietly. Lü Zhi entered the harem of Liu Bang, the founder of the Han dynasty, as a consort. At first, she was like countless other women, serving, watching, waiting. But when Liu Bang became Emperor Gaozu, everything changed. As empress, she wielded influence behind the scenes. She was cunning, patient, and ruthless in protecting her son's claim to the throne. When Emperor Gaozu died, Lü Zhi seized power as Empress Dowager and Regent. Rivals who questioned her authority paid the ultimate price. She had Lady Qi, another favorite consort, mutilated, thrown into prison, and left to die. Other opponents in the court were executed or erased. Historians recorded her reign as cold, even monstrous. Yet she stabilized the dynasty in the vulnerable years after Gaozu's death. Lü Zhi became the first woman to truly rule in Han China. To some she was a protector, to others a tyrant. But her story set the precedent. Inside the harem, one woman could decide the fate of a dynasty. Centuries later, during the Tang dynasty, another woman rose not through cruelty, but through beauty. Yang Guifei, famed as one of the four beauties of ancient China, captured the heart of Emperor Xuanzong. Born Yang Yuhuan, she entered the court with extraordinary charm and grace. Xuanzong adored her beyond measure. She danced, sang, and embodied the Tang dynasty's love of sensual beauty. But her influence bred resentment. Her relatives gained high offices. Courtiers whispered corruption, and jealous nobles accused her of distracting the emperor from duty. When the Lushan rebellion erupted, one of the deadliest uprisings in Chinese history. Blame fell on her shoulders. She was accused of bringing ruin to the empire through her pillowed whispers and indulgent allure. As Xuanzong fled the capital with what remained of his court, his soldiers demanded her death. She was dragged away and forced to hang herself. Yang Guifei's fate demonstrated the peril of love in the harem. To inspire an emperor's devotion was intoxicating, but it could also lead to a nation's hatred. Her story became legend, immortalized in poetry, art, and song, not as a villain, but as a haunting reminder of beauty's dangerous power. Our third tale is perhaps the most infamous. In the 19th century, during the Qing dynasty, a girl named Yahenra entered the palace as a low-ranking concubine, barely noticed in the vast harem of Empress Xianfeng. She was called Cixi. When she bore the emperor's son, the future Tongji emperor, her fortunes changed overnight. Cixi proved shrewd, manipulating court factions to secure her child's claim to the throne. After Xianfeng's death, Cixi orchestrated a palace coup against the regents meant to oversee her son. With alliances among key eunuchs, generals, and rival consorts, she outwitted them and assumed power as Empress Dowager. For decades, she ruled from behind the silk screens. Rivals were exiled, imprisoned, or quietly erased. She directed foreign policy, oversaw wars, and even manipulated succession when her adopted son, the Guangxu emperor, threatened her authority. To her critics, Cixi was a tyrant who drained resources to sustain her luxury while China staggered into decline. To her defenders, she was a survivor in impossible times, one of the few who held a crumbling dynasty together. For almost 50 years, she embodied the paradox of the harem, a woman, cloistered behind palace walls, yet wielding the dragon's throne itself. From Lü Zhi's ruthless purges, to Yang Guifei's tragic beauty, to Cixi's iron rule, the lesson is clear. The imperial harem was never a paradise. It was an empire within an empire. Behind jeweled hairpins and embroidered curtains, entire dynasties were made and unmade. The women hidden behind the walls determined who lived, who died, and who would wear the dragon crown. If power in the harem was a battlefield, then its weapons weren't only silk and intrigue. They were rituals and superstitions that governed every breath of life. The journey began with Xuanxiu, the selection of palace women. Every 3 years, teenage girls from across the empire were summoned to Beijing. Their families ordered to present them at the Forbidden City. Clad in their finest gowns, they stood in long, silent rows as officials inspected their faces, hands, and even the whiteness of their teeth. From thousands, only a few were chosen. The unlucky were dismissed. The chosen entered the harem not as beloved companions, but as property of the throne. Fate was sealed with a nod, a gesture, a glance. To be selected was a step into unimaginable luxury and unbreakable captivity. Once inside, survival was whispered to depend not only on beauty, but on the body's capacity to bear imperial heirs. Strange diets spread through gilded corridors. Exotic mushrooms believed to preserve youth, swallow's nest soup rumored to strengthen fertility, deer antler powders prepared as tonics of vitality. Some concubines were given aphrodisiacs infused with rare herbs, ginseng, saffron, even powdered pearls. Mixtures thought to keep their skin pale, their eyes bright, their wombs ready. Every bowl, every sip, was both hope and fear, because just as easily as diets could promise longevity, they could also conceal poison from jealous rivals. Surrounding it all was the emperor himself, called the true dragon, whose essence was believed to carry divine potency. His touch, his seed, his very breath were thought to renew life. Myths whispered that a single night with the Son of Heaven could cure illness, ensure a woman's place in eternity, or even alter her family's fortune. But childbirth was perilous. If an heir was born, it was celebrated as fulfillment of divine order. If a pregnancy failed, it was often seen as an omen, a sign of fate, or of secret curses whispered to the harem at night. Every corridor of the palace carried these unseen rules, where ancient medicine blended with superstition and diets, powders, and rituals blurred into taboo. The harem was not simply a prison of walls. It was also a maze of omens and mysticism, where a woman's destiny might turn not only on politics, but on a dream, a soup, or the flicker of a dragon's shadow. If the women of the harem supplied beauty and heirs, the men who ruled its corridors supplied surveillance. The eunuchs, castrated servants sworn to the palace, were meant to be neutral, harmless, incorruptible. But in truth, they were anything but. On paper, their role was simple. Eunuchs guarded the gates of the inner court, managed food deliveries, and recorded which concubines were summoned to the emperor's bed. In practice, this gave them unimaginable leverage. They controlled access to the Son of Heaven. And in the harem, access was everything. A glance, a night, a word with the emperor could change a woman's destiny. And it was the eunuchs who chose whether that word was heard, whether that petition reached the throne, whether that name was shuffled to the front of the list or conveniently forgotten. With such power, some eunuchs grew into kingmakers. They brokered alliances between concubines and court officials. They fed the emperor information or disinformation to tilt his favor. A clever eunuch could raise a woman to prominence, grant her family rank and riches, or extinguish her hopes entirely. Irony dripped from every act, mutilated and labeled impure. These men decided which woman was deemed pure enough to share the dragon's chamber. They were excluded from ordinary family life, yet they decided which bloodline would inherit the empire itself. Many emperors came to depend more on eunuchs than ministers. Some rulers trusted them absolutely, believing that without wives or children, eunuchs had fewer motives for betrayal. Others learned too late that those very voids made eunuchs hungry for power itself. Scandals abound. Eunuchs smuggling secret letters between rival consorts. Eunuchs growing rich off bribes from ambitious families. Eunuchs so influential that ministers at court trembled before them. In dynasties plagued by weak rulers, the eunuchs became the true hands of power behind the silk screens. Were they guardians or spies, servants or sovereigns? The truth is they were all of these. They maintained the emperor's harem, but they also manipulated it. And so, in the reddest irony of the Forbidden City, the fate of dynasties often hinged not on the emperor's whims, nor the concubine's beauty, but on the silent decisions of men who were no longer considered fully men at all. Walk now through the Forbidden City as it stands today. The courtyards lie empty. The red lacquer doors are cracked with age. Paintings of dragons and phoenixes fade on walls that once glittered in gold. The air is still heavy. The sound is only your own footsteps against ancient stone. What was once a living palace now feels like a mausoleum of whispers. And yet, listen closely. The silence almost speaks. It is as if the walls themselves remember. They remember the laughter of favored consorts, rising bright and sharp before vanishing into envy. They remember the rustle of silk in candlelit chambers, the muffled tears of women sent away in disgrace, the careful shuffle of eunuchs carrying secrets they dare not reveal. History remembers the emperors by name, but the harem was their crucible. It was here that dynasties rose or faltered, not on battlefields alone, but behind embroidered screens where love, jealousy, and ambition dictated the future of the dragon throne. It was not a pleasure palace, though it glittered like one. It was a system, vast and unrelenting, a machine to produce heirs, to stage loyalty, to mask fear. Every smile hid calculation. Every gift carried consequence. Even in its silence now, the harem feels alive, its ghost reminding us that an empire's greatness and fragility often lay in the same chambers. Did the harem sustain emperors? Or did it slowly consume them, wrapping rulers in perfumes and silks while intrigue corroded their thrones from within? Was it the hidden heart of China's power, or its hidden poison? The answer, like the silence of these abandoned halls, lingers unresolved. What is certain is this: the harem was never paradise. It was a crucible where beauty and danger coiled together, where dynasties were not only adorned but tested, betrayed, and, in the end, undone. The imperial harem is often remembered as a place of romance, beauty, and indulgence, a palace behind palaces, where women lived in luxury, removed from the hardships of the outside world. But that myth has always been too shallow. These women weren't simply hidden wives. They were dynastic players. Their rivalries could crown a new emperor or snuff out a family line. Their alliances could tilt government factions, sway policies, or even spark rebellions lasting generations. Behind their silk veils and painted faces, they shaped the very bloodstream of the empire. The harem itself was a paradox. Beauty fused with brutality, pleasure entwined with fear, intimacy soaked in politics. It offered unimaginable riches, but enforced absolute confinement. It promised love, yet bred jealousy. It glittered as luxury, yet struck like a prison. This contradiction made the harem not only a symbol of the Forbidden City, but of the empire itself, an outward show of perfection and an inner struggle of survival. And that's why the story endures. Because the harem was not just about emperors and their brides. It was about power disguised as intimacy, survival staged as beauty, and politics cloaked in silk. Even centuries after the Forbidden City's chambers fell silent, the dragon's harem still guards its mysteries, whispers of silken power that remind us that history's most dazzling palaces often concealed its darkest truths.